Welcome back, friends and neighbors, to the Ag Show. I've got behind me today one of the many concerns when it comes to planting that garden that we all need to be thinking about from the conventional side of things with our equipment to make sure that we don't end up in a situation where we're looking at costly repairs. This whole planting period is an excellent time to really think about the quick maintenance that can be done on your equipment and get you prepared to be out there into some of the larger conventional gardening that we're going to be talking about. So stick with us. It's going to be a good show.
Jon Vest is the Extension Agent for Floyd County with the Virginia Cooperative Extension. His expertise helps novice and experienced farmers produce quality livestock and crops throughout our region. Jon has offered to share his experiences with our audience and provide them with the knowledge to keep agriculture strong. This is the Ag Show with Jon Vest.
Understanding that on any given three-point system, there are numerous places of contact that in the event if someone got in here too close and a piece of clothing, long hair, or even a piece of rope or something like that was to get wound into the system during operation or while it was running, that PTO is set and is operating usually at around 540 RPM for many style implements such as this here. What that would result in is if you went from either side arm of the tractor up through the top link is actually three different points, whereas it took you every 540 RPMs around there. It can be very, very dangerous for an individual to be operating on anything while it's running. So certainly with the case of taking equipment off and on, do make sure that you're doing it safely and operating with the regulations and the necessary safety materials in place. We still have the nice safety covers and the actual covers on the PTO unit here, as well as the safety cover on the slip clutch. All those are not designed just to be taken off and cast aside. They're there for a reason, and that's hopefully to prevent that type of accident from occurring in the first place. Now, with this particular tiller here, like I said, this is for some of our larger jobs, but many of us, the neighbors around, if you drive down the road, you're seeing many gardens are getting plowed at this time, and the tillers are usually the next thing brought out for many of us that are operating at a larger level than just maybe the home garden, or you might find smaller versions of these tillers absolutely being used in the home garden that just simply aren't practicing the no-till operations or the no-till process. The important thing to think about when it comes to any piece of equipment or implement that we're putting behind the tractor is that yearly maintenance. And while in cold weather or cooler weather, it would have been an opportune time to maybe get this particular piece of equipment on into the barn or into the location in the garage shop where we could do the necessary maintenance to make sure we have no problems with it this season. This right here is a gear-driven unit. Like I said, it's getting its power from the tractor itself to the main gearbox. That gearbox in this particular case has a fill point right here on top. It's usually a 90 weight oil, but you would base it on whatever your owner's manual or specifications would be for that specific equipment. And we would oftentimes check to make sure that oil and fluid level is correct in the gearbox itself. We would then start to move and take a look at all the various grease points that we would find on the equipment. So largely the two main areas of concern would be our two large bearings that appear on either side of this particular tiller. One location for grease fitting is right here, And this basically provides necessary lubrication that is holding or withstanding the actual cutting bar or the various teeth that are running across this tiller, across the main side. To move over to the other side of the tiller, there is actually another another cover located on the far side of the tiller here, where the two gear systems of this particular unit are chained together. There's an upper fill point and a lower fill or outlet that would allow us to actually open that up, make sure that our fluid level is at the correct point for operation. One of the big things that we oftentimes forget with regards to the tiller as we're coming out of the field there at the end of the season and moving it into storage is that we need to take some additional time to make sure that the main tilling bar across the inside of the unit is free of anything that is wrapping around its tines or wrapping around its main bar that works and is tied in to these main bearings that I'm talking about. What oftentimes will occur is either in the materials that have been left over from last season, we'll see twine, occasionally we'll see wire, you may actually see plastic material. All those things tend to wrap very quickly around that bar that extends across the tiller. And what will happen is, particularly as it gets near the bearings on either side, you'll have a situation where that wrapped material will start to build up heat. It'll actually, with the revolutions that are occurring, it may actually compromise the bearing cover itself or the bearing seal. And at that point, some of that material can actually make its way inside and compromise the bearing. So before any tillage is ever considered for this new year, we're going to talk, we're going to make time to make sure that this particular implement is clean of that debris, has that material removed off of its actual tillage bar. We're going to check for any damaged teeth or loose teeth due to the rocks and to our various quartz rock that we tend to have a lot of here in the county. We're going to check for anything that's loose or out of place that may need to be tightened up and addressed before its usage. One of the things to consider once the tiller has been hooked up and attached to the tractor itself with regards to its PTO and the system in place, we now need to look at the fine tuning and the adjustments necessary to actually position the tiller so it will maximize its ability to do the cutting and ground preparation that it's designed to perform. There is by adjusting backwards and forwards, particularly this top link right here. Right now the tiller, as it's hooked up, appears to be rocked back somewhat slightly. And if I was concerned about some rock or some other material there in the field that I was going over in the garden, that may be some concern to me, throwing material back out in front of what I'm trying to prepare as a nice firm seed bed behind the unit. So in this particular case, once again with the drawbar and everything, or excuse me, with the implement settled in its finished resting place, what we're going to do is work to adjust the top link back in. This will help set this the upper portion of the A-arm system back over top, drawing the tiller back up, really giving it a more flattened or level appearance behind the tractor itself when it is at operating level. And what that will actually enable us to do is when we are out in the field and we're tilling, we're able to allow the tiller to fully rest on both skid plates that are located on either side. By having those skid plates and the tiller set down at a set length or a set height, it's really controlling the depth at which this tiller is performing at. By enabling the tiller to also set back up over itself, we're getting the maximum performance out of the tiller from the process of churning and turning everything up within the unit itself. And with its tailgate down, will allow for the prepared seed bed as we're traveling forward to really kind of be firmed right behind the tractor as it's making its pass. So what we result in is a much more even, a much cleaner appearing seed bed, and one that has actually been firmed somewhat to accept our access from any seeding operation or planting of material that we would like to transplant in or whatever we may choose. An additional consideration to think about as we're changing implements back and forth amongst or during the season is what components that are existing on the tractor or with a particular implement, how they may contact each other. One of the things to really think about, particularly with garden tractors or your smaller compact tractors, even with the larger utility tractor like what we have behind us, is leaving a drawbar in place and having the operation of the tiller move up and down behind the tractor could potentially create a situation where your drawbar could contact your PTO. It's something that you'd absolutely not want to happen from the standpoint of potentially tearing up the tractor system and or the tiller itself. As long as we're controlled in height and we don't have a situation where that PTO can contact a drawbar, we're fine to leave it in place. But in many groundbreaking situations, I would encourage the removal of the drawbar prior to a tillage operation. In any three-point system, this is the area that safety should be absolutely paramount. Here's an ideal situation or an ideal example of something that should not be occurring. Anything that's loose or potentially to hang down or create a situation where it could potentially wrap the PTO system is a situation where it could really tear things up, certainly clothing if it's on you. Looking here, your main drive system coming out of the tractor is this PTO shaft. It's actually two pieces, slides backwards and forwards to accommodate the height and the depth at which your implement is traveling. The drawbar is that component down there below, oftentimes used for tractors or for trailers and or other pulled implements behind the tractor. And once again, if I'm using an implement that is actually seeing groundbreaking operations behind it, that might be a very good item to remove during the course of the implement's operation. Right here we have the adjustable arms for the tractor. They make up the other 2 and 3 components of the 3-point hitch system. So from arm 1 to top link to arm 2 over here, those are your 3 points of attachment to your actual equipment. These arms are designed in various categories based on what type of implement they hook to or they're designed to hook to. They can come in various class categories. And it's also important to think about your side arms on the tractor having the opportunity to be adjusted and or kept in line with the tractor as it's traveling. Many cases in Southwest Virginia, certainly Floyd County, when we're operating on hillsides, we don't want our implement to walk to one side behind us. And by having the additional components tightened up and in place, we can ensure that those lift arms for the tractor itself are maintaining that equipment directly behind the tractor. As we're looking here, this is the type of material that we oftentimes will find itself wrapped around a tiller unit or any type of implement that has a revolving base inside. Our concern really becomes this location over here where we have a bearing seal that's housing and keeping a bearing in place in here that we keep lubricated. As this material starts to wrap, it can actually work into the actual seal itself, resulting in bearing leakage and or bearing failure. So that's the type of material we absolutely want to cut off and have removed off any tiller, whether it's a rear tine that we're operating on foot, or a front tine tiller that we're operating from behind the unit, or even the tractor driven system that we see here. Lastly, our skid plates. This is the area of the tractor, or of this particular implement, that we would like to see the skid plate operate as level as possible during its field of operation. So in this particular case, this tiller is cocked back just a little bit, and we're going to bring it back up to a more level point by adjusting our top link in and allowing both sides of this tiller to operate level across the ground it's trying to prepare. I'd like to mention here, with this particular implement behind the tractor, our main adjustment for this tilling operation is occurring right here in the up and down movement of the few bolt holes that we see there for this particular skid, as well as the corresponding skid on the other side. And what you can see here is tillers only operate in a few inches or the depth of their tine that's occurring equivalent to this skid. So when it comes to garden preparation, repetitive usage of a tiller year after year and time after time will result in a pulverization of the soil in probably only a 3 to 6 inch soil depth. And what that could potentially result in, if we're not paying attention to the soil situation in the individual garden, is we can create a hard pan or that potential area in the soil just here at this depth that the tines never reach. And with our continued compaction and traveling over that soil year in and year out in our garden preparations, we have maybe several inches of nice pulverized soil, but we'll create a very hard region just there below that soil that could be impenetrable to root growth. It could impact our water and our drainage. It will, in every case, potentially limit our garden development. So that's one reason why every third or fourth year, specifically in conventional systems such as what we're using here, we need to think about either a rip plow or turning fully with a moldboard plow, actually turning the soil at a greater depth to once again break the hard pan that over tillage can create. I would like to mention, folks, that depending on the tiller that you've chosen to purchase, or certainly that you might have already in your home arsenal, tillers are designed to operate in one of two directions: either forward tine tilling like what you see here, or a reverse tine tilling that would enable the material to actually be worked backwards and back up toward the front of the tractor. Both come with their benefits and also their cons to some degree. Largely, I'll point out that it has to do with your initial setup in your field or your garden as you start off in your tilling process. If you have a front tine, or the tiller is going to continue in that clockwise position, what we're faced with at that point is the churning of the material inside the box, the tailgate, and the preparation as the material's coming out the back is being firmed in place, but it tends to throw that area to the back. So sitting in position will actually create, I call them the speed bumps around the garden or around the field that we oftentimes later feel on the bush hog. But we have to be cautious not to create those types of situations where we are creating a low or depression as we enter into our actual gardening and or tillage location. The same thing can be said about the rear tine tillers. The operation creates a kicking of the soil or the draw of the soil back up towards the unit. So you may find, depending on how which unit you have, that how your garden is actually positioned or how you travel across your garden can in one day create a situation where you're actually helping bring soil down the hill. And that's something that we'd rather not do. We'd rather always try to create a situation where we're maintaining the soil particularly on a sloped garden location, back up and as high and as original to its location as we possibly can. So it's something to watch when using any either type of tillage or either type of implement, even the walk behinds that we may choose in the smaller garden situations, allowing them to be utilized in a direction to maintain your soil upslope is certainly the preferred means of trying to prevent those low divots and those speed bumps into your garden area. As we adjust a top link, you'll notice, for those that are unfamiliar with a top link, they're actually drawing in or maneuvered from two different sides. So in turning counterclockwise, I'm actually bringing the top of this tiller back up and closer to the tractor. When it comes to adjusting any implement back and moving its top point back, it's just simply a clockwise position or clockwise turn of the top link, and will get us generated back into as level an operating point as we can be. I think that's about the point at which I'd want to, operate this tiller. We'll go ahead and take our locking nut and we'll turn our locking nut up against the turning point of our top link. And once locked in place, we're in a situation now where everything's set up and level and should really perform at the full capacity of the tiller itself. As we look at the tiller here, and it's been kind of prepped and ready to head over to our field, I do want to explain the tailgate is currently in its raised position. That's something that if I'm working in an overly rocky soil, or in a situation where I may have some root systems or small stumps or something that I'm concerned about in my initial preparation of a garden area, I may leave that tailgate slightly up. But certainly over continued use or continued operation, that tailgate serves two purposes. One, when it is down, it encloses the tiller so that you're getting the maximum pulverization and stuff occurring inside the unit itself. And then two, as the material is fed out the back or is allowed to travel out the back with the tailgate laid closed, it really does firm and prep a seed bed that has a little bit of resistance to it, and in many cases an ideal situation to go out and transplant in or even seed directly into. I did want to mention along to our viewers, there is one more safety device in this particular that's been installed with this particular implement, and that is where the PTO itself, the PTO shaft, it's actually mounted and connected to what we call a slip clutch. And the slip clutch is a device that operates between the actual gear-driven portion of the tiller itself, the power unit, and the PTO being driven from the other side. And based on how tight we tighten a series of bolts around the clutch, it would allow, in the event that the tiller actually contacted a rock or a tree stump or something along those lines, it would actually allow it to slip and not create a situation where the power of the two units coming together would really drive back up through the system, tearing up either the tractor or the implement itself. So something to think about, regardless of whether it's just tiller or whether you're using some other type of groundbreaking implement, bush hogs included, brush hogs. Do consider the installation of a slip clutch from a safety perspective of this type of equipment. Years ago we were looking at a $1,700 tiller. Today you're probably looking at a $2,800 tiller. And certainly that's nowhere close to the operating PTO system of this tractor. So we always want to keep things in good working order, and that's one way to be a little preventative when it comes to the possibility of tearing something up in that groundbreaking process.